Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Concussion Nerds. And today we are joined by a special guest. Vanessa Woodburn and I met, I feel like we actually probably met about a year ago at this point.
I think.
And we connected through our love of concussion and brain. She's been on her own journey, which she's going to share with you today. And then she has taken her own journey and she's turned it into writing a book, into creating a whole coaching program for others to support on their journeys, and has done some really beautiful things. So Vanessa is a health coach and the author of Bounce Back, Reclaim Your Life After Concussion, which she wrote after her own experience of healing and navigating the world post-concussion. Vanessa is the founder of the Bounce Back coaching program, which works with people to help them feel healthy, whole, and confident again after concussion. So welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm so glad to be here with you today. I've been learning and listening to you, like you said, for, a couple of years now. So it's an honor to be with you.
Yeah. And so we talked about this in the intro of the show, and you and I talked about this before we hit record on this episode. Part of what I want this podcast to be is truly us learning from each other as well, right? We talk about concussion recovery, especially when we're shifting into that persistent concussion recovery, because it affects so many components of an individual's life. It's more than just the science, right? It's more than just me being able to say your vestibular system is not working great. We have to do vestibular rehab, right? It affects who you are. It affects your identity. It affects your spirituality, and all these different pieces come into play. And I have another program that's called the Medicine Circle. And this is a program I do for people with PCS. And the reason I called it the Medicine Circle was not the contextual term of medicine that we think of in the Western culture, but more, I believe that every single one of us, you, me, whoever we invite on this podcast, the neighbor down the street, everybody has their own type of medicine to bring.
I love that.
Yeah. And so this podcast is getting to highlight some of what you, Vanessa, bring to this space to help people heal.
And I think that's why I've been drawn to you as a practitioner and as a clinician, and learning from you is because I see that you bring in and weave in, as you said in your podcast intro, the science and the spirit. So that really resonates with me too.
So again, like writing Bounce Back came out of your journey with PCS.
Yes, it did.
So because guaranteed people listening to this podcast are on this journey, some of them might be in the acute stage, some of them might be years down the road. So can you share with us your story?
Okay. Yeah. My concussion actually happened 7 years ago, which is hard for me to believe that now. But 7 years ago, yes, my husband and I were actually overseas. We were on a vacation doing a cycling trip through a part of northern Italy. Beautiful. It was September of 2016. And I had a really bad crash on my bike. I was wearing a helmet, but as you know, that doesn't prevent concussion. So lots of bumps and bruises and scrapes and some fractures and a concussion, which ended up putting me in the hospital in Italy for actually a couple of weeks because of some internal injuries that I had. And after they had ruled out, the red flags, brain bleed, skull fracture, which they did, they just told us you have a concussion, and I needed to be on bed rest for some of the other kind of things, but no one there really talked to me about that piece of it and what was going on. So I remember, from the early days, my husband and I realizing, okay, we've got some figuring out to do on our own here. Never mind the fact we didn't speak Italian, really.
Right. And we're in a different country or in a different side of the world.
Yes, that definitely complicated things. And we were in a pretty rural area, so there wasn't always guaranteed a doctor or a nurse that spoke English either. So anyway, fast forward a couple of weeks, 3 weeks later, I'm home. The very first thing we did is went to my family doctor to just bring him up to speed and, see what he recommended. And he did the things that family doctors are trained to do. I do remember there being some assessments walk from here to there. He was checking my balance. He was doing memory tasks and activities like that. And I basically got you can probably guess it, that you're fine. You had a concussion, but you're fine. And so off you go, just rest. It'll take its time. There's really nothing you can do. Like all the cliches, all the things that we know now aren't really true. And I remember being really, really scared when I left his office because I thought none of that feels right to me. I'm not fine. And I'm not going to believe that there's nothing I can do about this. And there's got to be other ways. And I forgot to mention this part, but I had just completed my training to be a health coach. I had just finished, not kind of knowing where exactly that was going to take me. So isn't it amazing how when you talk about the science and the spirit, right?
Full circle here.
Right.
Well, and I think that feeling you described, I want to hit on that a little bit more. That feeling of, I was being told I was fine, but I was scared.
Yeah.
And I think you're not the first person to share that with me, right? There's this phrase that gets out in the medical world that it's just a concussion. And I understand why that phrase gets said, because we know by definition a concussion is a reversible neurophysiological metabolic injury. We know it's reversible. So it's just a concussion in terms of you don't have a brain bleed, you don't have a fractured skull, you don't have that. However, it doesn't change that you're still scared.
Yeah.
Because again, I think sometimes as clinicians and as medical providers, that's the human response, right? You can't do the things you normally do. You don't feel, and tell me if I'm wrong, because again, I've always shared I've never had a major concussion, but you don't feel like you.
It was little things too. I can remember my mom coming over for tea and I couldn't remember where the teapot was in my house. That was really scary. I was trying to empty the dishwasher and it's I have no idea where these things go. I went to the grocery store to get things and I couldn't remember how food and groceries were categorized in aisles. That mapping in my head or whatever it was, that was not accessible to me for a while. So that I was scared. It created anxiety. And those are the kinds of things that a family doctor's not going to pick up when they're just doing the regular tests.
They're not. And I think sometimes too, especially when, let's face it, I'm an emotional person. I talk about feelings all the time. I didn't used to, right? And so if you go to your doctor and you're he's fine. And again, we always talk this element of safety and feeling being heard and feeling being validated. And in Canada, we're both in Canada, but in BC, GPs, they literally have 5 minutes with you.
Yes. There was definitely that sense as well.
It's not built.
Yeah.
For that. So then it's they tell you you're fine and you're but well, am I fine? There's almost this internal tug of war, and you don't feel like you can say, but I don't feel like me. I don't feel fine. And I think sometimes that's where, as clinicians, we need to take that extra time, especially in those first couple of appointments, to be I need you to know that if you're experiencing it's okay.
I think had someone said to me, this is normal that you're feeling like this, and that would have gone so far. But there was no one even sharing the information. One of the first things I love to tell people is this is rehabilitatable. This is reversible. This is not permanent. It feels scary right now, but it doesn't have to last forever. And at the time, 7 years ago, I don't think that was part of the conversation. No. No.
Sorry for interrupting, but I just wanted to pause and really acknowledge you sharing that, because I know that's a piece that I've had clients come in, share after. And I also know it's a piece that people feel they sometimes can't share. And so as clinicians, and this is why already having this conversation with you is due diligence on our part to be the initiators to bring that up, because you already said it, it fed into some more anxieties. Of course it did.
Yes.
Of course it did. But we also know from the science side, when we look at all the pieces, that increased anxiety can prolong recovery as well because of the mimicking of symptoms. But of course you were scared. Of course that fear led to increased anxiety. And so had we been able to support that better in the beginning, it just, anyways.
Yeah.
Okay. So there was this fear.
Okay. So thankfully I found, and again, I Googled, someone said to me, actually, a friend of mine who lives in BC said, try cranial sacral, go see an osteopath, try that to see if that helps. And so I Googled, osteopath in my area who does cranial sacral treatment. I didn't even really know what it was. found somebody, went to him, and he was amazing. And he put me in touch. I did great work with him, but he put me in touch with a concussion management clinic right away because he knew that, okay, there's lots of pieces of the puzzle here that he couldn't address. So he was so good at referring out. And that's when I know, yay. And he was kind of ahead of his time, I think.
Sounds like it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's when I really felt like validated and seen and heard when I was talking to a concussion literate provider who just knew that what I was experiencing was, yeah, these are the things that you're going to experience and this. And, you know, we did the Buffalo treadmill test and we did all the things. And she definitely got me on the road to recovery. That was a physiotherapist that I saw. Yeah.
I love it.
I do remember, and this kind of ties into something you were saying before with how important it is to let people know, like, yeah, it is scary and there's going to be some anxiety in the beginning. I was being really hard on myself, even about like 6 months in with that self-talk. I think even the physiotherapist that I was working with, she wasn't super good at that sort of emotional side of things. And when I looked at her and told her, yeah, my heart is racing and I'm anxious all of the time and I want to cry all the time, she was kind of like, oh, like, okay, too bad for you. Let's move on.
Didn't know. And like, kudos to her for being like, this is not my like.
And again, 7 years ago, maybe that piece of the puzzle wasn't so well known, but I had been referred to a therapist. And I think I had a real turning point with her when I was sharing with her some of like my self-talk. I was being really hard on myself. Like, why is this taking so long? Why aren't you over this by now? You should have figured this out by now. You should know what to do, all the things. And she said to me, Vanessa, can you talk to yourself like someone you love? And she introduced this whole world of self-compassion to me and keeping it as simple as, can you talk to yourself like someone you love in that kind way, in that way that recognizes this is a human experience you're going through. And of course it's going to feel like this, but you know, I was building the support around me and we're going to get through this. So she just helped me with that kind of language. And I kind of took that piece of the puzzle and really ran with it. That really, really resonated with me.
So I'm very open that like, I believe every human being needs a therapist, honestly, day and age. And so I've been very open on my social too. Like I have a therapist when I've used to help me work through some of my deeper traumas. And at one of our therapy sessions, she had said, can you send me, she's like, do you have a photo of when you're a little girl? And I was like, I sure do. I have this photo of me and these like, oh my gosh. So I was like a curly hair carrot top kid. Yeah. And I have this photo of me. It's in this little dress with like this big heart on the chest. And it's white with like red polka dots. And I have like socks to halfway up my calves and these little dress shoes.
Yeah. Very earnest little Natasha.
Absolutely. And I think I was like maybe 18 months, 2 years old in this photo.
Yeah.
And I should probably ask my mom. I actually have no idea. And I sent that photo to my therapist and because I was dealing with some self-talk. And I go to my next therapy session and she's like printed out and laminated this photo of me, little me. At different points and given me different sizes of them and said, I want you to put one of these in your wallet. I want you to put one of these on like the visor of like my car. Yeah. She gave me like 5 of them. And so she's like, put one on your bathroom mirror. She's like, because I want you to ask yourself, very similar, like, the words you're saying to yourself right now. Yeah. Would you say those to little you? And I was like, no. She's like, so why would you say them to you? Right. She's like, and it's the same thing. I don't doubt that's a huge part of what you do in your coaching too. And we talk about it with my client. We reframe all the time. But it's like, you wouldn't talk to little you that way, or you wouldn't talk to someone you love that way. Why is it okay to talk to ourselves that way? And it is that piece of refinding love for self.
It's such an important piece of the puzzle.
And I think when we can start to find that love for self again, that's when also we can start to find grace. Yes. Right. That's when we can start to let go of that urgency and that stress to like, I need to be here then. And it's such a powerful piece of the healing journey.
Yeah. Do you see the sign on the wall behind me? Can you see
Oh,
it?
I do. You are loved.
Yeah.
And then
And
I love
it's
it has the adventure begins as well.
yes. Yeah. So those are all very, very intentional messages that I need to remember. And then I want the people that I'm talking to and working with to remember. But yeah, and that was like a chapter of my book. It's just that, like you said, that self-love and that grace. Yes, that there's a mountain to climb right now. Yeah.
So tell me how the book came about then.
Yeah. So, I spent that first year in the persistent concussion phase for a while, but then started moving out of it and realizing, okay, like I want to get this health coach practice up and running. And I started doing workshops, not concussion specific, but really about this self compassion and self love and self care in my house,
I love it.
in my basement.
How we all
Yep.
start.
I have pictures in my basement of like, it just being filled with people. And yeah, I was doing these workshops. I was before COVID, so there wasn't a heck of a lot online. And then I would have people say to me, oh, Vanessa, you got to write a book. And the opportunity presented itself in the fall of 2019. I was doing some speaking and some public speaking, and the speaking coach that I was working with had written a book with a writing coach, and she told me about it, and I interviewed with them, and they accepted me into that program. And so it all came about with this sense of like purpose and that it was meant to be.
I love it. Do you know what I love hearing the stories of too is you've taken us on this journey of like you were on vacation, you got a concussion, you got crappy advice in the beginning. No one's fault. This happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
You went through the recovery process and then you took that and you channeled it into something creative as an outlet that had to have continued to help with your own healing.
Yes, it did
Writing
very
back.
much. Yeah.
Can you share how writing Bounce Back continued to foster your own depth and healing?
Yeah. And I find like still some of my friends who have read the book, especially in the self-talk or self-compassion piece, I'll be doing something and being hard on myself. And they'll be like, I know someone who wrote a book about this. So even though the book is called Reclaim Your Life After Concussion, there is that universal message in it of, and this is also where I come from as a health coach, is really like, let's look at all of you. Let's look at the whole you. Like, how are you nourishing yourself? And I'm not just talking about food. I'm like, it's talking about who are you spending your time with and what are you listening to and how are you moving your body and caring for yourself, all the ways that we nourish ourselves and the self-compassion and the reframe. And I learned so much from Brene Brown's work in Rising Strong. If you've read that about like writing your own story, it's like, okay, yes, this happened, but I'm in charge of how it's going to go from here. I have some choice here, right? I read someone else who said, if you have to go through hell, don't come out empty-handed. I was like, yeah. Yeah. And I think all of those things about nourishing myself, taking care of myself, thinking about how I'm talking to myself, those are the things I wrote in the book that helped me heal and get back on my feet after my concussion. But they're also just part of life. It's a universal experience, not concussion related, but knocked down by life in other ways in the last 7 years. And I can go back to the same tools and strategies over and over and over again. Yeah.
I always say to people, there's this fallacy that people think the work ever stops.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like the work never stops. If you stop doing the work, you stop evolving as a human.
Yes.
Right? It's just we ebb and we flow. And there's some seasons where we go really deep. And there's some seasons where like we're going to coast a little bit. Right. And there's seasons where we don't feel like we have the capacity or the resources to undo that. Because I always say, when you start to open that door and like walk down those stairs, you have no idea what's going to come up.
Yeah.
And so sometimes there's seasons where you're like, I know there's stuff I got to do. I don't have the capacity right now to do it.
Yeah.
And then there's those seasons where it's like, I don't care if I have the capacity or not. It needs to be done.
It needs to be done. Yeah. And I think what you're talking about, and I love that you brought this up, is the fierce side of self-compassion. And Dr. Kristen Neff is the social scientist who's kind of done all the research on this. And I've read her stuff, and she talks about fierce self-compassion, which is, what we've talked about, loving yourself and talking to yourself like little you. It's hard, but it can feel like the soft side of self-compassion. The fierce side is how am I going to provide for myself through this? Like, what do I need? Asking yourself that very simple question, what do I need? And then taking action on it. And it's protecting yourself in terms of, I like to keep it as simple as thinking about boundaries, like what's okay, what's not okay with my time and my energy. And then the other side of fierce compassion is what do you need to do to motivate yourself? And that's exactly what you're talking about. Like, this needs to get done. I am the one in this who has to do this. I got to take care of myself while I do it, but I'm the one who's got to do this. I'm the one who's got to walk through this valley to get up that mountain.
I've never heard of it phrased that way. So thank you. That's beautiful. And I think too, like going into your topic, like we need to be motivated to do this. As humans, it's like we're motivated in two ways. We're motivated to move towards pleasure, or we're motivated to move away from pain.
And there needs to be a balance, right?
Yeah. Ideally, we're moving more towards, I like to think that sometimes like my main motivation is moving towards pleasure, but there's absolutely been times where that motivation is I need to move away from pain. But it's this piece of also stepping back and looking at yourself. I always say like being curious about ourselves.
I love that.
Judgment. Like zero judgmental, like just be curious.
Yeah.
It's a moment of, am I motivated because I'm moving towards something that I believe in, that I see, that that gets me excited, or am I moving away, or is that motivation moving from pain? Because there's only so much moving from pain can get you to versus moving towards pleasure.
Yeah, you're right.
Tell me a little bit about what the Bounce Back coaching program is, because we have people listening to this podcast who are on a journey. We have clinicians. So what is the Bounce Back coaching program?
Yeah. So as a health coach, I'm not a clinician like you. I don't diagnose and assess and come up with treatment plans like clinicians do. But I know from my own experience, especially in this concussion journey, that it can feel like so many pieces of the puzzle when you're putting together all the clinicians that you are working with, right? I was working with a physiotherapist, an osteopath, and a chiropractor, and a naturopath, and all those things. So the Bounce Back program is really my way of helping people put all those pieces of the puzzle together and walking beside them through that so that they feel supported, so that they have someone kind of guiding. And because I'm like ahead on the journey. I know what can come next for them. I can help them implement the day-to-day stuff of what it is that they're being asked to do at home that can feel so overwhelming, especially when you've got, cognitive fatigue and all the other things that can come with it. So, and I have loved learning from you about the nervous system piece. And so I really weave that through as well, and just helping people feel calm and with strategies to do that. And the self-compassion, I weave through all of it as well. That's my thing.
So it's funny because moving into this month, the email list is all about team and different components of team. And every team needs a quarterback, right? And I feel like with so many of our PCS clients, probably the coaching clients, that quarterback is missing. And they're trying to be their own quarterback.
It's a very good way of putting it.
When you're dealing with cognitive fatigue, when you're like, to be your own quarterback, to try to understand, that's a lot.
Yeah.
So could we say that in essence too, like the Bounce Back program is the quarterback to your care?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good, thanks for giving me that word, because that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah. And then I also have people who don't feel like they want to step into something that's 12 weeks long, right? And so I also like to just let people take it at their own pace, and we can just work as they need as we go, whether that's one session or, 2 or 3 or whatever. Yeah.
I love it. That. I love how you've taken your own journey, Vanessa, and like turned it into something that you can tell it like warms your heart and like builds your own cup, but being able to take that and turn it into something to help others. Like it's just beautiful when that path comes up that way, and it's just inspirational. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
But what is the best way for people to connect with you?
Yeah, they can go to my website, which is www.vanessawoodburn.ca. And I do actually offer a digital download of the book there. I know a lot of people who have concussions don't like to stay on a screen.
Yeah.
But it is there. I offer that because I feel like it's sort of like a lighthouse in the darkness. It's how people find me, right? When they're searching for the quarterback.
So have you ever thought about turning that digital download into an audio?
It is actually on Audible right now as an audiobook. It's not narrated by me, unfortunately, which I'm ready to do. I wasn't at the beginning. I think it was still a bit too emotional for me. I am ready to do that now. It's still under contract with Audible for a while, so we're going to leave it, but it is on Audible. People can listen to it. And I would love to offer people a free digital download from my website, or they can just email me and we can get in touch that way.
So we're going to drop your links for your website and stuff below in the show notes. Vanessa, thank you so much for joining us. This was beautiful. I love some of the takeaways that people are going to leave here with. And thank you for all that you do in the concussion space.
Thank you. Thanks for everything you do.
That's today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you liked what you heard, give us a like, give us a share, give us a tag on Instagram, and please never hesitate to reach out. We love communicating and connecting with you. Until next week, my friends, have a marvelous day.